There you go. And again, this was recorded earlier today at 3 p.m. Eastern. So let me play that clip. I'm Clif. And let's set this for the table. I want you to have a specific segment on the show here this evening to bring your experience to bear on your experience with David Wilcock here, how you got involved with the Gaia TV lawsuit, the Corey Good thing, and how you had specifically also reached a helping hand to David here last year through your Twitter account and through other means here, seeing the degradation and seeing this unfold, unfortunately, in front of our very eyes. Can you start by sharing with the audience members, Clif, how you got involved with this cast of characters here at Gaia?
So I'd actually been contacted by David Wilcock in the 90s when I was first starting out. And so I had a brief conversation with him a couple of times, like 94, 95. Other than that, no contact. And then I was aware of him over time. And then he started doing the stuff with Gaia. And my first encounter with it was first interaction was when he had Corey Good on. And Corey Good was doing some stuff that I said was absolute bullshit. It didn't meet my test for reality. And I thought he was lying. And Corey,
I think you're talking about the series Cosmic Disclosure.
Way back 2000, what was it, 14 or something, maybe 15? Anyway, and so I made my opinion known on Twitter and got into something of a, it wasn't an intellectual battle. It was more like name calling on Corey Good's part. And he was associated with David Wilcock. So David Wilcock, according to, and Jay Widener is much more authority on this, David Wilcock brought Corey Good into Gaia, okay, in order to get another stream of income. The problem, all right, then, so this is basically my take on it. I had interacted with David that brief period, had watched him over time, had seen him fall into the spell of Corey Good, and saw that his life was not going well from 2022 onward. And then in 2025, I saw that he was heading for suicide. I did not think he would use a weapon. I thought he would use something like fentanyl or pills or something. But that it was not good. His mind was breaking down. We've seen that in his countenance in these last videos. I would always check in on his videos. I still kept thinking there was, last year I had reason to think that everything had hardened. And so like June of last year, before I moved to this new house, made a real serious attempt to get hold of David and to sort of shake sense into him, right? I didn't have an adversarial relationship with him, right? I bitched at him at times. He had blocked me on Twitter ever since he'd gotten involved with Corey. And he knew I'd been fighting with Corey, and he also knew that I kicked Corey's ass in the lawsuit, right? And his attorney. So anyway, I contacted David last year on June 5th, the day before I moved here. And he took my phone call, okay? But he was not receptive, all right? His mind was in a terrible state even then, and his authority for everything, even then, even after all the abuse he had suffered, his authority for everything was Corey Good. So I offered him a plan to save himself, save his reputation, and get him out of the situation he was spiraling into. He didn't listen to all of it. As soon as I got the first couple sentences out about how I was thinking he should do it, he realized Corey Good could not do this, and it was going to be a no go. He couldn't basically get out from underneath Corey Good, right? Mm-hmm. Now we come to the unfortunate end of this situation when David's mind lost its grip on reality, and he committed suicide. And now my reason for speaking on this is, I'm not eulogizing him or anything. Some of the things I will say about him are likely going to be somewhat harsh. They're just a realistic appraisal, but it needs to be said. The reason it does is because we have the LARPers. We have Corey Good trying to make things out of his death that are not factual and to promote his grift again. And we have Carrie Cassidy, who doesn't think very well, also promoting an erroneous idea about David's death. So just dealing with Carrie Cassidy's idea, she says that David is a scientist for Scifi Aerospace Company. Scifi Aerospace Company is a Ponzi scheme. They took David Wilcock for over $1 million and probably much closer to $2 million. They disappeared all that money into their founders, and he was left with nothing except a nominal title and feeling like an idiot. And after a while, he kept trying to think that there was going to be a rescue, right? And he does not understand business. You can tell that he was operating in a fantasy world the way he talked about what would happen when Scifi got this money coming in. And he just doesn't understand the real world at all. And he was extremely impractical, and it was never going to happen. So he was doomed to this. So to address Carrie Cassidy, David Wilcock is not a scientist. He's not a critical thinker. He's never done science. He's a good presenter, okay? But he's extremely gullible. He has no discrimination in his mind. He used to, and he couldn't decide what is factual and what could happen and could not happen. And he's also suffered grandiosity, which I think you will see with when Jay Widener talks about him. David's whole life was grandiosity. He had to think he was the star of Gaia, which he was. And so some of his life had success and meaning. He was a New York Times bestselling author, but that doesn't keep you alive forever. You got to keep producing and so on. He fell in with Corey Good because that was an option to get more money out of Gaia. He was the star at Gaia at that point. Everything was going his way. This was going to be a good move. His problem was that David is gullible, suffers from grandiosity, and does not have a discriminating mind. And Corey Good is a manipulator. And in my opinion, Corey Good is an antagonistic manipulator, must hurt his victims for his own reasons. Corey Good has also used extreme narcissistic techniques on David Wilcock. And it was through Corey that we find David Wilcock is isolated. So Corey had convinced David Wilcock to jump ship and leave Gaia, his point of his identity. His whole point of his successful identity at that stage was being the top guy on Gaia. And yet Corey Good polluted his mind and had him write this rambling multi-page resignation letter that was full of fantasy. Corey Good invented this idea of the Gaia employees movement. And Corey Good invents all these things as part of his LARP and affects David's mind. David quit Gaia, instant loss of income, and has to start scrabbling again the way he had after 2012 when he was relying on himself. So it was difficult for him to make money. He made some money with his courses and stuff. Corey Good tried to follow. And what Corey Good does is what's called triangulation. It is a narcissistic technique. And what they do is they befriend you, and then they casually mention something about someone else that is negative. And they mention it casually as though it's no big deal, just thought you ought to know, guy is a bunch of shit or whatever, right? They keep doing this over time, and you start accepting their opinion. And the whole point of the narcissistic triangulation is for you to find yourself isolated, because now, if we had a person, Corey Good would badmouth a person subtly over the course of time. They wear you down, they alter your perception over this course of time, and then David wouldn't associate with that person anymore because he had a bad impression of that person from what Corey had told him, and he'd never ever questioned or made Corey substantiate it. It's just the way the narcissistic dynamic works. Corey Good is very good at that, right? He ran his whole cult that way. You can talk to Jordan Sather, a lot of these people that were involved with him directly, and you'll find that the language is there constantly. So Corey used the narcissistic language to warp David's mind, and he eliminated all these people from David's life. That's what triangulation is. You must depend on me, the narcissistic, antagonistic manipulator, and no one else. I'm your whole world. And this is a form of grandiosity that Corey Good has. After all, he's the galactic ambassador. He knows better than, from Earth. He knows better than any other human on Earth. And so he gets David into this particular situation. And David had problems. His wife divorced him. He lost the house in Sedona. He had money issues. He couldn't pay the taxes at the IRS because he'd given all his money to Scifi, which was a Ponzi scheme, a scam. So Scifi is an aerospace company that's never produced an airplane, never hired anybody to design an airplane, never bought an airplane part. Their only asset is a hangar they use to store manure or garbage. And that's being taken away from them because they haven't paid anything. They have tons of debts and lots
They're
of
involved with multiple lawsuits. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. For 30 damn years, they've been involved in lawsuits and running a Ponzi scheme, right? And so it's never going to happen that somebody was going to bail David out. That was, in my opinion, that was David's exit strategy to get away from Corey. Okay, because the Scifi people would have nothing to do with Corey. They didn't like him from the get-go, didn't relate to him at all. He was not welcome at any of the meetings, and they didn't like David even mentioning it, right? So anyway, that was going to be his exit, but it was bullshit. They were basically doing the same thing to David as Corey had done, trying to triangulate him away from Corey and get all his money. Once they got his money, they didn't care about him anymore, as we see with the course of events. So last June, I called him because I thought he was heading for a suicide. I thought it would probably be this year. It would take about a year from then. I wanted to try and give him a plan to get out of his situation, which would have rescued him. It had been done in the past by others and had a proven success record, but he would have had to have done some really tough internal work in order to pull it off. And he's just—
And a bit of mea culpa also for good measure.
A lot of that. That was the point, right? In the 1890s, there was a con artist. This con artist worked up and down, right? So in the 1890s in the United States and New York, there weren't movie theaters. There were kinescopes where you could turn a little handle and see flashy images that moved, right? There were all kinds of entertainments, dances, and so on, but they didn't have movies. They didn't have anything like this. What they did have, though, was public lectures. And there was this one guy that was a con artist, and he conned people with his public lectures, saying that he'd lived out west and had all these great adventures, very much like Corey Good, okay? None of which were provable. And then he did this for like 10 years, made a lot of money. He wrote a lot of books, these pulp fiction books, made money that way, spent it, and was, a profligate and just ran through the money and kept going. And then his scam died in the 1890s, and he didn't know what to do. So he went through a long night of the soul, and then he started doing public lectures on how I scammed all you fuckers and how this shit worked. And that was a tremendous success for him. He made far more money doing the lecture circuit saying how he was a badass and had scammed everybody than he ever did scamming anybody. And he died a reasonably well-respected individual, right? And so I was going to offer David this plan because I'd studied this fellow, I'd read his books and the whole thing, and it would have worked for David if he'd done the mea culpa and said, "Well, I was a dumb shit. Corey Goode was full of crap and all of this, but here's how it happened to me." People would have been fascinated. They like his personality or aspects of it, right? Unlike Corey Goode, nobody likes his personality, and that's why you needed people like David.
Right. Let me ask you 2 questions. You talked about the spell of Corey Goode being the manipulator, triangulation, the isolation, and all that. At this point, is it all Corey Goode, or is there an agency behind Corey Goode feeding all this as well? Because in speaking with Jay Widener, he opined at some point that there might have been some infiltration at Gaia, some unnatural promotion of this cosmic disclosure by other agencies as some type of a setup or a
so I believe that.
Okay, so
but I don't think that they actually are controlling Corey or ever contact him or ever have any damn thing to do with him whatsoever. He's just a useful object that they let go flying off because they can profit from the chaos that he creates.
Right.
And that's what they did.
And on the downside, when all this crumbles, they can point and say, "Oh, you see, all these people researching UFOs, they're crazy.
It's nothing to do with us. We know what we're doing."
Yeah. Stop looking at that. Just pay attention to officialdom. There's no ETs. These are not the droids.
Right.
Rinse, repeat, and we're getting more and more of these in the UFO community. You said at that point, though, Wilcock was not receptive to this. He was still too far down.
When I contacted him, okay, so I probably should have tried to do it this year. I'm not going to beat myself up about it. His karma is his karma. But he was not receptive back then. Corey Goode was still his authority. And in our brief conversation, he must have mentioned Corey about 7 or 10 times.
Right.
We're talking in like just a couple of minutes before he hung up on me. It was quite clear that my talking to him severely agitated his mind, right? This is another thing. So if you're under the sway of a narcissistic dynamic and someone else intrudes from the outside, it breaks that dynamic flow in your mind. You become very upset. You don't know why you're upset. Your emotions are being thrown up because all of a sudden the control structure is breaking. And so that's what happened to him. I didn't understand that dynamic to that degree when I had contacted him. Now I would have contacted him in a different fashion in order to try and overcome that. But again, his karma is his karma. And here's the thing. So David, in my opinion, was basically killed by Corey Goode triangulating him into isolation. That David's mind is he's not like me, right? I can sit quietly in silence for years. Doesn't bother me. I'm comfortable with myself. David is not like that. He needed that, the social presence of being on Gaia. He needed that contact. And the last thing he needed was to sit in isolation on the top of a mountain in Colorado. And he's woefully inadequate for that life anyway. Couldn't even start his gen set, right, when the power went out.
Right.
So you would have thought it maybe might have dawned on him, but it never did. He was not a self-examining person, just like Corey. Neither of these two personalities are self-examining. Okay, David because he doesn't want to face his own horror and weakness at that time when he was alive. Corey because he cannot face that, can't break that control over his mind of the manipulative personality aspects. So anyway, so now here we are. David has killed himself. And everybody's a lot of people are trying to profit on this or spin it one way or another for their own mental issues.
Let me ask you. There are those out there already in the last couple of hours who are suggesting that this suicide has something to do with all of those who were questioning the Corey Goode narrative, the David Wilcock narrative, and that those people, by questioning some of these scams, discavati, and all that stuff, they caused the suicide of Mr. Wilcock. What do you say to that?
I doubt that. Okay, so Corey Goode is claiming cyber stalkers. He's done a video. He's named Jay Widener, Steve Cambion, came close to naming other people. He didn't, though. So no, that's not the case. Okay, so all of those people are indeed culpable, but everybody on the planet is culpable in David Wilcock's suicide because we're all alive on this planet at this time doing our shit, right? They were doing just their stuff. They were saying, hey, David Wilcock's involved with a scam. They're not trying to disrupt him. They're not trying to cause him any emotional pain. They're just trying to tell people out there, David Wilcock was involved with a scam. Don't get sucked in by it, right? Just like with Corey Goode stuff. Just like with me telling everybody Corey Goode was full of shit. He never went to space, blah, blah, blah. I got a lot of grief. I got the lawsuit on me. I won. Corey hasn't fucked with me since, right? So it was okay for me to go through all of that. But these people are not the cause of David's suicide. You might be able to suggest with some weight of evidence, how much, I don't know, but you might be able to suggest that Corey Goode was directly responsible for David killing himself. We don't know, except for Corey's statement that the last time he talked to David was last February. Maybe he decided he needed to dispose of David and just tweaked his mind to take care of it, right? Because he knew David was so deep into it. And if you are involved in these kinds of manipulated, antagonistic, narcissistic relationships, and you're fully set in on it, you do not have anybody when it breaks, right? Yeah. You don't have anybody, but all of a sudden the shock of everything that has happened to you. So imagine David waking up one morning, 4:20, and discovering that he'd thrown away everything he had ever wanted in his life. Gaia, the fame, all of that, and he did it for this bullshit from Corey Good.
It's a rude awakening.
It's tough to take, dude.
One of the things I wanted to do with this episode tonight, and it's very delicate, balancing all of this, we talked about the rinse repeat of removing and having detractors in the UFO community as controlled opposition, and how that's been played out, and all the deaths that have been associated for many decades now for the secrecy of the ET component. These types of situations, as ugly as they are, the cyberbullying, the lawsuits, all that stuff, are all presented in a way to dissuade people from even researching this topic. What I wanted to do tonight is find a way to have an adult conversation, at the same time not throw the baby out with the bathwater, and encourage people, as nasty as this sector of investigation and research is, to continue pressing forward on that specific research, which is involved for everybody on the planet here in this crazy reality of ours. What do you make of that? What would you say to encourage people here to not be dissuaded by all this very, very
I don't think they would be. If anything, I think it would attract people, right?
Okay.
Like Kerry Cassidy screaming that, David is the 13th scientist.
Right.
Here, right? And in fact, you have to also look at something else. The UFO area is attractive to unstable minds. So there's a disproportionate number of wackadoodles, right, that are concentrated around the UFO thing. There's also what I'm calling now, there's a tendency of social media to promote this techno-fascism, this techno-based narcissism, because no one gets called out on it. No one has to face consequences. So Corey Good is promoting all kinds of narcissistic, or he's using narcissistic techniques in all of his Twitter and all of his social media and stuff. His language is filled with it. His latest video is just replete with him trying to maneuver things. Oh, I want the community to do this. Oh, the community has to put pressure on the police to investigate this. And then he says, we were shamed by these police, meaning him and David, because they laughed at us when we said that Stephen Cambion made a death threat.
Right.
I'd laugh too. But in any event, though, so it's bogus. Okay, so the people that are going to investigate I don't think it's going to discourage anybody. It's actually a point of attractant. Look how much attention it's been put on the subject. And the people are profiting off of David Wilcock's death. Corey Good directly and Kerry Cassidy directly. Kerry Cassidy is trying to spin some bullshit about David being a scientist and Savati being a real company for her own reasons, to prop up her own LARP, her own structure of how this world actually supposed to work, according to Kerry Cassidy, none of which is factual, just like Corey Good. He's never been to space. He's not part of a secret space program, and none of this shit is factual. And in fact, I think Corey Good is next, right? I don't think he's physically well. He looks very bad in all of these videos, and his aura is extremely disturbed, much more so than usual. So I think he's on his own pathway. Anyway, though, so the situation is that Corey's trying to, he's claiming that David deserves justice. And I think so too. That means let's investigate Corey Good and what he did to David, because no one else was responsible for isolating David, getting him to quit at Gaia, and all of this other stuff, right? So I think Corey Good has a very big responsibility. I think David was a victim of Corey Good. Yet another one. You could name all the people that were in the cults. Jordan Sater was a victim of Corey Good. I'm not a victim. I was just simply one of his enemies that was able to beat him, right? So there's a different dynamic here between myself and Corey. But there are a lot of victims of his still out there, and he's still hunting for more. And it's, universe is not cooperating. He's not had very much success. And also now I think he's really screwed himself, because he said some things in this latest video that contradict what he's told the court on his bankruptcy case. And he was trying to use David as a way to divert the court. He's lying to the courts continuously. They know he's lying. It's difficult for them to deal with it. So they sort of sweep over it and get on and try and push it out with procedure. But they know that none of this stuff is factual. And he's done some stuff that's going to bite him in the ass with these latest videos. Anyway, though, so there is no community that is going to listen to Corey Good. And anybody in the UFO area, you got to develop discernment. You got to learn sooner or later that, there's a lot of minds out there that are spewing shit, that are LARPing and lying, and, they've never been to Mars. And this is something else. So David Wilcock also has a big participation in this, right? So even in '94, he was working on things that later on would produce he always had lived in a fantasy. He thought he was the reincarnation of Edgar Casey. He was frequently paranoid, thinking that people were chasing him, government types, that sort of thing. He had some success being a government or a figure within the government UFO hearings and these kind of things. None of it actually went solid for him because he was always working the scam side of it. All right. Knowingly, I think. So he told Kerry Cassidy about jump rooms to Mars. He was, promoting Pete Peterson and all of these old farts that had no contact with reality and were able to spew garbage about the UFO stuff into the space. And he wasn't responsible. It wasn't his stuff. It was his insider. Right? So it's this separation that prevented him from having to take moral responsibility for polluting the stream, so to speak. And as I say, he was gullible. He had no discernment. So he was lying back in the 90s about the technology, whether he knew it or not. He was promoting lies, Dan Burish and all of these other guys in this long history. Now, we have a whole history of people that have actually been suicided by the deep state, right? Bill Cooper and a lot of these people had alcoholism and other problems. But there's real evidence that the deep state used these in their termination mode, right? I can't see the deep state wanting to get rid of David. He was, good for him alive.
There's no lack of evidence of people being suicided to keep the secrecy. You've talked about this many times. In this particular case, in your opinion, this is not what's happening here. So,
no, this was a victim of Corey Goode, in my opinion.
Right. I read a book when I was a young man called The Senator, My 10 Years with Ted Kennedy. And it shows this guy who's in this political field creating all of these stories and having, maybe too much drugs and having all of these crazy thoughts and conspiracy theories and delusions of grandeur and all that. And it's a cautionary tale. And I was seeing a lot of that play out here with David Wilcock in the last couple of years. So it's very sad to see. Cliff, in the last couple of minutes here before I let you go, is there anything we're missing here in terms of cautionary tale for the audience members who are just getting into this? They're looking at some of both sides of the fence here of what's happening with this particular story. Can we cut through the chase here, in your opinion, encapsulate this in maybe 2 minutes here? What are we really looking at, and what do we need to take as a lesson here moving forward?
What we have to take as a lesson is how vulnerable we are to our own minds. Things you see on the internet are not called out. There's no questioning. This forms in your mind an inherent willing suspension of disbelief, as though you were watching a movie. Once that is done, your mind is willing to buy and believe the bullshit, right? And this is how it works. They give you enough of a truth that you can validate, and then they pile on all this other bullshit, assuming that you'll accept the other bullshit because it's been validated by that small truth. And this is what we have to watch out for. Everybody is constantly being played. There is an active manipulation subset of humanity. So the psychiatrists and people that think about this, they think maybe as much as 10% of the planet are psychopaths. And Corey Goode would fall into that category, that are manipulating. They have no issue with causing problem and pain to people. They don't care. They're just part of the goals to get this done. If that is true, then you should figure that probably more than 10% of the stuff you read in the UFO community online is bullshit because it's these manipulators attempting to run their own scams. And, get to conferences and all of that kind of stuff. David Wilcock was one of those manipulators. He just wanted to present information. He never validated any of it, right? He would always present enough, tie it in loosely to something that sort of made sense, and then go on and never stand and support his work. And so this is what you're facing. So in my opinion, read it and assume it's wrong. Assume that it's a scam. And then if it's not, it'll prove itself.
Right. ClifHigh, thank you so much for your time here today, folks. If you want to see more of this, you can find him, of course, on his Twitter as well as here on his Substack. Thank you again, Cliff, for all your time today. I will be adding this clip to the panel show this evening. Thank you, sir, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Okay, hold on. Okay, there you go. Thank you, ClifHigh, for that. Again, guys, go check him out on his Twitter. He's been tweeting about this also in the last couple of days, responding to comments and questions from his audience there as well. Let me give you the opportunity first, both of you, to redirect some of the comments that you've heard ClifHigh make in that segment. And then after that, I'll do another round and ask you for your closing statements on what your takeaway is from this whole situation and what you would like to convey to the audience before we go. So first, Jay, while you're there, any redirect, any additions to what ClifHigh was saying in his segment? Oh, hold on, Jay, let me just unmute you. There you go, go ahead.
It was a fairly succinct presentation. I think that he's got down what was really the dynamic of what was going on, and I think he nabbed it. And great presentation, good talk. Thanks, Cliff.
On the idea of grandiosity, that was the term that ClifHigh used. He said Jay can speak more about that. Can you quickly explain what Cliff was meaning by that and your experience with David Wilcock and his penchant or propensity for grandiosity? What did he mean by that?
David wasn't afraid to tell you how great he was. he enjoyed telling you how great he was, and sometimes he would go overboard and start telling you stuff that he thought was great that actually wasn't very great. And so he didn't really have any way to put a boundary around a lot of it. And, I don't know. My own suspicion with David is that he grew up, he had both parents, but I believe it was probably at least his upbringing was more mother centric and less father centric. And I think that he knew that, and he felt inadequate as far as masculinity.
Okay, I understand now where that's coming from. Thank you, Jay. Penny, let me ask you also, let me unmute your microphone here. Any redirects, additions, things you don't agree with, anything else to decipher here, some of the comments made by Clif in his segment?
No, I would just underscore some of what he said. One of the things he said starting out was David fell under the spell of Corey Goode. And Jay has alluded to that. And I would agree that when you lose yourself, when you don't have enough of yourself in a pile, and somebody powerful, manipulator, I'm familiar with all of that psychological stuff, the triangulator, the narcissistic person who manages to isolate you until you just don't know which end is up. That I've seen that for many times over the last 45 years. And that's a very, very dangerous place. It does drive people to do things that they would never ordinarily do. And some of that is good, driving them to do something they would never ordinarily do. It's a good thing. Some of it is not so good. The grandiosity, that's the same thing that I was calling David's need for attention, his need for recognition, his need to be special, et cetera, et cetera. And that, when you can't get that, you'll go to great lengths to try, let me try this, let me add that, let me say this, let me do such and such. And it just gets worse, and you just dig yourself in a deeper and deeper hole. And then I think just in terms of the sadness of David being taken in by this company, I've seen some companies like that just, they tag, I think Corey and was it Clif or was it Jay or both said that Corey latched on to David, and so did this company, Stavati, is that what it was called?
Stavati.
Yeah. Latched onto him for his money and to use him. And they did. And they were very successful. And David was the loser in that situation. And they're just like, we don't care. They don't care. They don't care what they did to that man.
Mm-hmm.
And a very sensitive, brilliant man has been lost to our population because of that.
Okay, I'll come back to the takeaway question in just a moment, Penny. In your introduction, somebody just reminded me in the chat, you had mentioned that last night and earlier this morning, you tried to connect with David on the other side, and you want to share some of what you saw there, or some of what you think is appropriate to share with the audience. Can you very quickly share that with the audience, and then we'll go back to the major takeaways here before we go.
Well, I think what I'm willing to share of that, I'm going to go back again. I'll just say that the connection was sad. It was not good. When people leave here, you leave with a mindset and you create that. You are drawn instantly, almost immediately, into worlds or situations that match your mindset. And so what David left here with was a feeling of being hunted by everybody and everything. And that did not leave him in a good position when he got to the other side. Like I said, I did ask for some help. But one of the things I think is important for us as humans to understand is that there are forces. They're humans. Some of them are here in human form, but there are lots and lots of intelligences, forms of intelligence that exist. And why do people gather in worlds? Why do they, people of like minds, kind of like minds, who kind of agree? They don't all agree very well, but it works. They gather in worlds because it becomes a place where they can shut out, for the most part, all of those difficult, weird, everything out there is looking for energy, because energy is what you need in order to transform and become more powerful. And sometimes that power trip doesn't have a good ending. So we form worlds as a way of protection. It's, every so often I talk about, we're going to build a new world here. Yes, we are. Why? Because we like being in a safe place. It's relatively safe compared to being out of the body and out there in, I'm going to say, in the soup, where there are lots and lots of creatures and critters and forms of life, inorganic and organic, all over the place, that you may not have any experience with and really have no idea how to deal with that. So, just, I think David got under the spell of something that we typically don't invite here into life here. And you have to be judicious. I've done a lot of exploring. Cliffy's done a lot of exploring. That's just part of the way that we are in terms of what's out there. How do things work outside of this three-dimensional world? David reached out into that world and got consumed by it in many ways, and got betrayed by the people here who backed that up. So,
and that's what you saw as transferring over to the other side when you connected with him last night and this morning.
He felt like when he left here, what he seemed to be feeling were two major things. One was that everybody was after him, that he was being hunted. And some of that was hunted by the IRS. Some of that was hunted by beings that were not here. Some of that was hunted by all of his beliefs about how the MK Ultra and the, all that bad stuff operates. I mean, I don't want to go into that a whole bunch, but we all know that there are some things that have people have been experimented on, and David was way too sensitive to be involved in that kind of stuff without some kind of stabilizer, and he didn't have a stabilizer. And
Right.
So he took all of that with him and was not, I mean, I would say, if there's anybody out there listening tonight, all you people in the comment section, just take a minute, tune into the universe and ask for help for him. He needs a little help right now.
Right.
We've been in worlds that are incredibly frightening.
Thank you, Penny, for that, and thank you for the questioner reminding me to have Penny go back and feel that that gap in that storyline from last night. Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, while I have you on, Penny, I'll end with Jay. For you, what's the main takeaway from this story here? It's very sad, I know, and it's very emotional. I'm seeing it in the comments. It's a very difficult subject. We're trying to make light of all of the elements that may have influenced this, but ultimately we set the stage at the beginning talking about discernment and trying to make sure that we don't throw away the baby with the bathwater, I think is what I said originally. Right. What's your main takeaway, having looked at all of these angles here tonight, and what is it you want to share with the audience members here?
I think we're in a rough patch right now. We're in a pretty rough patch, and it's going to continue to be rough for the next 2, 3, 4 years. And it might look like it's easier to just leave, just give up and leave. It's really not all that much easier to leave. So what I would say is, yes, there are some risks to trying to expand consciousness. Don't get caught in illusions. Stay grounded, and we need people here that are awake, expanded, and grounded. We need you to be able to help create, recreate, rebuild, regenerate this world. so that we don't disintegrate and end up in a bad place. So.
Great advice. Thank you for that. I echo that same sentiment, Penny. Jay, let me ask you the same thing. You heard ClifHigh also on the parting statements on the main takeaways and what he wants the audience to consider as they're looking at all of this information and try to not get too emotionally charged by what's happening. I agree with Penny also that we're in just for some tough times, and we're probably going to see way more of this here in the next little while, just by the nature of the events and how they're unfolding now. What would you like to share as a main takeaway? Oh, hold on, Jay. Hold on. Your microphone. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
Mental illness is loose everywhere right now, and society isn't doing anything about it. They're encouraging people with mental illness in Canada to die. We're living in a world where the old ways of helping mentally ill people are now vanishing. They don't send people to psychiatrists anymore or psychologists. So this kind of mental illness is growing and growing, and we've lost the spiritual ideas of how to combat mental illness. And so we're drifting on a boat in the middle of the ocean with no way to get to shore. And I think that David's passing is proof of this, and that we watched collectively him descend into mental illness. And it was tragic, and we all felt it, and we all tried to do something about it. But the situation was just beyond repairable because he had isolated himself so much, and he would actually refuse to answer the phone. I tried to call David at least 3 times in the last 4 years, and he wouldn't answer my calls. So, I really wanted to help him, and I feel bad that I didn't. And so, yeah, I think Penny's right. He's probably in a bad place right now, but he won't be there forever.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. In terms of mental illness, folks, let me just share this tab with you guys. The Colorado Crisis Services, there's a number on the screen here. There is the suicide hotline here as well. You can take a snapshot, and I also shared in the links below the Mental Health America website, suicide prevention helpline as well. If you're feeling any of these tendencies, please do reach out. And as Penny was saying, we need you, every one of you, to create this new world and hang in there. There's value to each and every one of us, even though you might not see that at the time when you're in your dark place. And that if Corey's experience is any indication to you, reach out to people around you, and you'll find that there are people there who want to help you, and perhaps pick up the phone when those people are calling to try to help you. I have to say, I had a difficult time putting this show together. I was emotional too. Been a great fan of his work, David. A lot. Again, wisdom teaching was the big highlight for me. I wanted him, and I had promoted and put energy to Clif's strategy last year when he had posted that he had a way that David can get out of this and still save face and come back. And I still wanted that to happen. I wanted the David Wilcocks of the world to be able to continue their work, maybe take a reprieve at some point, or mea culpa, as Clif was saying, but also come back and contribute to this world. He had a great mind, and I'm very sad that it's come to this. I'm saddened by this whole story. I'm saddened by some of the vitriol we're seeing online also in the last couple of days. It shouldn't be there. You guys are all adults, and you all have the rights to your opinion. But this is a delicate subject matter, and I hope that if you've watched this show, I hope that we've been true to the intention this evening. And if you think we did a good job, please leave us a comment below, and please share this also with your friends and your families. There might be more people who are in dark places right now who might need that help, and this could be the video to spark some of that humankind helping each other out here in these difficult and transitional times that we find ourselves in here between the Kali Yuga and the Dwapara Yuga. So a big thank you to both of you. Let me just share quickly also with the audience members, for people who want to follow Jay Weiner, you can find him at Reality Check. This is his YouTube channel, and you can find Penny Kelly also here on Penny Kelly Official on YouTube. Jay Widener's website is jaywidener.com, and Penny Kelly, it's pennykelly.com. So a big thank you to all of you watching this evening. My heart goes out to Mr. Wilcock and his family, and I hope that you will join us in asking universe, as Penny was asking there, for help for this transition time for Mr. Wilcock and for all of the people involved in this crazy, crazy story as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I'm Jean-Claude Mystic. I love you guys. Have a great evening, and we'll see you soon. Au revoir.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
See ya.